I'm Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development, Alejandra Castillo. As Administrator of the U.S. Economic Development Administration, I'm honored to be able to periodically highlight the work of trailblazing women advancing the cause of American prosperity and economic equity. This month at EDA and throughout the federal government, we are celebrating Women's History Month. And though we spend March celebrating women's history, the impact women make to American economic development is one that is truly felt year around. I invited my good friend Pam Eason to join me today for a brief conversation to discuss some of the work she's doing and to ruminate on key issues surrounding women and economic empowerment. Pam is the president and CEO of the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, a mighty group of passionate advocates for women business owners. The council sponsors and awards the WeBank certification, the most widely recognized and respected national certification for women-owned businesses in the U.S. It also organizes events and programs that engage, grow, and inspire women entrepreneurs and business leaders. Prior to joining the council, Pam served in executive positions at Pfizer and Texas Instrument. As an undergraduate, she studied accounting before going on to earn a master's degree in business and finance from Johns Hopkins University, right down the road from us here at the Hoover Building. Among many accolades, she has been awarded with the Women's Business Enterprise Hall of Fame Executive Leadership Award and was named a Woman of Achievement by the National Association for Female Executives. You'll also see her featured in Women Mean Business, a new book by Edie Frazier, filled with more than 500 insights from extraordinary business leaders. With that, welcome, Pam. I want to start out by not only taking a minute to just talk about the decades that you've spent advocating for women in business, but also for women leaders. And looking back from when you started your career to where you are now, where have women come in the business world, and where do we still have to grow? So taking a look back and then taking a look forward, what do you see in this amazing crystal ball, if one would say, of what your career journey has been?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much, my friend, for having me here with you. I want to say Happy Women's History Month to everyone who's out there listening to us. And also to say, I really am so appreciative of the great work that you do at Commerce. It's such a difference for us as women-owned businesses. And just to know that you're there advocating for us, you and your team, really makes a world of difference. So I want to say thank you really quickly before we get started with that.
Appreciate it.
You look back. In my case, I've been in business for about 40 years. I didn't realize it was that long till I knew this question was coming, and I was like, "Oh my!" I've grown up and didn't realize it. And so really, what I want to think about is the most, I guess, systemic change that's happened in those last 40 years was actually the passage of HR 5050, and that actually required that the census count women-owned businesses. Which, of course, when you have the data, right, it's really useful. So that was very useful to us. It created some women business centers to make sure there were resources out there. And that happened in 1988. And then also it really did a lot to make sure that women, when they needed access to capital, did not have to have a man as a co-signer, because up until 1988, they did, right? And so when I say what systemically changed, that's definitely what systemically changed, right? And so I think we need to recognize that there is a role of our government in ensuring that we can continue to make these types of changes exist. I'm sure that there are young women growing up today that didn't ever realize that they couldn't have gotten a loan by themselves, right? And they may never know that, but I've seen that happen in my lifetime. And so I think that has changed formally. I think informally what has changed is there's been a lot of focus on the true impact that women in business and small business have around making true economic impact in communities where we live and work. So the good news is that while it hasn't changed as much as we wish that it would have, it certainly is making change, right? I think that in the 1980s, there was probably a focus on the difference between a business led by a man and a business led by a woman. And now I think that we're using our brains in really great ways. And we're saying, yes, there's differences for women, but guess what? There's difference for our women of color. There's differences for our women who were veterans. There's differences for our women who are LGBT. And so what I like about where we are today, not as far as I want to be, but what I like about where we are is the actual recognition that there are changes that need to happen out there, and that we can, in fact, have women in every line of business that are out there, whether those are women workers or whether they're women in business.
As you mentioned, these amazing monumental moments in time, they happened in our lifetime. Like, it wasn't hundreds of years ago. We're just talking about 1988. I was pretty much in high school already. So it's remarkable. And I'm glad that you started with the Census Bureau, because, as you know, census is part of the Department of Commerce, which is important because the data gives us that visibility.
Absolutely.
So as you think about not only this moment in time, what are you what keeps you up at night as you think about the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we help women business owners both support them in that access to capital, access to contracts, access to markets? What should we all be working towards?
Right. Well, you hit the nail on the head that the biggest concerns we have are access to capital and access to markets or to opportunity, right? So you know that better than anyone, and I'm sure the audience here with us knows that. I think that the biggest challenge we face right now is the polarization that exists in our current environments around conservatism versus being liberal, and on trying to make everything a political matter when it isn't a political matter. This is an issue of we want the United States to remain the strongest player in the worldwide economy, and full participation of women-owned businesses and equity and inclusion for all is what leads to the best economy that is out there. Right? You get not only the most revenue in that particular model, which is of course important, but you get the best solutions, right? The best innovation. So I'm a big supporter of full inclusion. And my biggest concern is that we will let politics take over, and either whether I said, as I said, whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal, it doesn't have to be about that, right? It doesn't have to be about whether you're Republican or you're Democrat. It needs to be about really understanding the leadership position the United States can have and ensuring that we keep that for all of the people that are part of our United States.
I'm smiling because you have so eloquently stated the talking points that we have, and they're not necessarily talking points. They are reality, right? You and I travel, we talk to so many people, so many women entrepreneurs who have great ideas. And as President Biden said in his State of the Union, the voices of women and women in business and how powerful that is. But as colleagues of mine at the Department of Commerce usually say, red or blue, everyone sees green, which is growth. We all want that growth. And Pam, as you continue to expand on this conversation with regards to U.S. competitiveness, think about the broader scope of the different types of businesses in terms of industry. What are you seeing? Are you seeing women gravitating more to tech and innovation? Are you seeing them working in more of the traditional spaces? What are you seeing in terms of the evolution of women and the enterprises that they're starting and growing?
Yeah, so great question, because, if we look back to say 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, I think we saw women in certain traditional industries, right? Maybe in staffing, right? Maybe in some of the things that would be considered more traditionally places people were comfortable with women being in the workplace. And I think that where we've gotten to is this real proof that women can perform in any single area. And it's really about getting that education behind them and that experience and that understanding how to operate in those environments that is making it easier for women to get into all areas. I know at WeBank, one of the things that we do is we look at every industry that's out there. And so the good news is you have women-owned businesses in almost every industry now. I remember when you and I might be having a conversation and go women in construction and everybody just looked at each other, right? Well, women in construction, that's one of the largest areas that women are growing in now. So I think we can be super proud that the initiatives, and again, those systemic efforts to make sure that we get more women into STEM, right? That we make sure that there are trade schools available to teach women these trades where they weren't necessarily traditionally located 40 years ago, right? Those types of systemic opportunities are making it a possibility for women to show up in every single area of the economy. So really, I'm seeing growth in every area out there, every industry, and I see a willingness by both the public and the private sector to say, what are the barriers that exist, in our case for women, but they do that for many underserved populations, but in our case for women, look and say, what keeps women from being successful here, and then trying to address that.
I love that because that opens the door for a shameless plug for commerce. The secretary speaks about women in construction, and it's reality. We have $48 billion of broadband work that is going to require so much of those efforts and women entrepreneurs who are in that space. When you look at the bipartisan infrastructure law, you're looking at construction, engineering, just a plethora of opportunities. Similarly, I have to put a plug for tech hubs. When we talk about tech hubs, we're talking about creating the next industries, the industries of tomorrow, which will be not just in cybersecurity, but quantum and agro-tech. And I see the magic of how those federal investments are really bringing in women who, as you said, they look at the problem and problem solving through different lenses. And that's the beauty of the diversity. So thank you for bringing that and continuing to support women entrepreneurs in their entire journey. But one of the I shouldn't say impediment, but one of the areas that I know women are hungry, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, is about advice.
Yes.
That technical, not only technical assistance, but also that advice of shoring up that call that sometimes we doubt ourselves or we just don't have the tools. What are the advice that you most frequently provide, or advice that has been provided to you in your journey that you share?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing that's become important to me, and I would say maybe in the last 5 years, and I really learned this from others, and I probably wish I had learned it earlier, which is you need to use your voice, but you need to use your voice in a way that people will listen to you, right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to make that statement all the time, and I'm a firm believer in it. I remember the first time I heard it, and I thought, that's a good idea, right? But I didn't internalize it, and I didn't really think about if you spend time talking to others like you and I are right now about things that are important and you share your thought process, you're not saying to people you need to believe the way I believe, right? But you're putting a general awareness out there of a thought, of an opinion, of something that may need change, right? And the fact that we're simply talking about it, regardless of whether people believe or don't believe, when you start to do your kind of search into a fact base, you can on your own develop what your own opinion is, right? So I used to think when I was young that I needed to answer fast, right? So like something would come out there, and if you were participating as a woman, if you wanted to be heard, you had to be fast. Right. I now very much realize that I can sit back, I can really consider what's being discussed, and I can quote what needs to be said in the situation with a great fact base, with a great background. And I think that the more people understand that sitting at the table as an equal allows everyone to put their best comments forward, that's what leads to the best solutions.
I love that advice. Let me turn that advice a little bit more and ask you, as you think about that guidance, how does that play out in the federal space? I often
Yes.
hear folks who are like, I'm not in tune with what's happening in Washington, D.C. That's just, bureaucratic speak. Tell me, how have you seen it play out at this moment in time when
Right.
both the administration and the federal government are making these massive investments? Where do you see WeBank's voice most instrumental?
Okay. So I would say this was a little bit like a couple of years ago when unfortunately COVID hit. No one really knew what supply chain was, right? Like I worked in supply chain. I would tell people in my family I worked in supply chain. They'd tell other people I worked in supply chain, but no one really knew what that was till COVID hit, right? And all of a sudden, with all these discussions about interruption in supply chain, now almost anybody can talk to you about supply chain. And better yet, the supply chain for the specific item that they couldn't get during COVID, right? And so I think that anytime that you're having those conversations, it's a super important thing to do. It's what pushes the needle. I think that what I like about our democracy is the ability to have people who have different beliefs and to have them come to the table and talk. But the part that I absolutely disagree with is where we are today, which is no one's held accountable to make a decision. Right. And so we need facts to be understood by people. And it's perfectly fine to lobby for whichever your position is, but we need to be forced to come to a consensus. Now, I know in consensus that no one got exactly what they wanted. Okay. But I also know that sometimes when I don't get what I want, and it's because of consensus with another person, we actually got a better solution. Right. And so, as leaders, if we would step a bit back and say, I'm going to listen to the other person, I'm going to speak with meaningful words when I speak, I'm going to get out there and talk about it with everyone, but I'm going to demand a resolution. Right. I'm not going to just leave something hanging out there to just continue to create more and more and more problems. So at WeBank, I think that's what we do. We look across at whether there are organizations like yours that we can have discussions with to see how do we move the needle, whether it's with the National Women's Business Council, whether it's with other partners like NGLCC or NMSDC, whoever those partners are, we want to make sure that we're listening to what it is they have to say, that we're sharing the information we think we can impart. And then while we as WeBank don't do legislative activity, we have a partner, Women Impacting Public Policy, and you spoke with their past leader, Candace Waterman, last year. Their current leader is doing a great job as well. And they are true advocates for the legislative side. Again, they're nonpartisan. So there are women that believe one direction and women that believe the other, but they're using our process to try to come to a solution. We have a democracy. Let's make it work.
Oh, I love that. I love that. As you think about what keeps you up at night, I also want to hear what excites you. What are you like so eager? You're just impressed that within the next few years things are going to such will blossom.
Yes.
How do you reconcile what keeps you up at night and then what excites you?
Yeah, they might even be somewhat the same sometimes. So AI, I'll tell you, I have a little bit of technical understanding, and in some worlds, I might even be considered to have some. But I think in the world of AI, some is like 10%, and people who really understand AI, they're at the 90 to 110% of really understanding not only what it can do, but the impacts, right? The potential future impacts. I think that AI has the potential to do a number of things that can improve process, that can assist us with better innovations. However, I think that it also has a lot of potential problems, and I'm not sure that there are enough people, there are some people, but not enough people thinking about AI gone wrong, right? And so that's probably what I spend my most of time thinking about. I am an accountant by heart. That's a terrible thing to tell people, but I am. I was raised as an accountant. My master's is in international finance. And so I love numbers, right? And that's why you hear me say data all the time. And so one of the things that keeps me up at night, again, is both a positive and a negative, is I try to think about what parity means, right? So if I just think about gender parity for women and men, if every woman-owned business right now were able to average the same amount of revenue as male-owned businesses, right? So in our small business community, that would add $7.9 trillion to our economy. Okay. So that's just if men and women were equitable. Okay. we're going to work on that. We're going to keep it going. Gender parity is important, et cetera. But I also care about all the women that WeBank serves, right? Women do serve our women of color. Women serve our white women. Women serve our LGBT women, our veterans, our differently abled women. And I could go on and on. Basically, if you are a woman, we support you, right? And so if we just looked at the same average revenue of women of color with white women, there would be 667 billion of revenue added. Okay. Those numbers, like, they keep you up. Like, how can we not make this happen? Right. Because if this was my personal bank account and these were opportunities, I'd be out there fighting every day to make these things happen. Right. And so what I wish is that everybody in our economy could understand cause and effect, right? How programs are making a difference. And if they could understand that, they would see that we wouldn't stay in this stagnant economy or slow growing economy, but we would be creating so much more for everyone. Now, it sounds Pollyannish, but I've lived this way my entire life, and I've seen this change occur throughout the last 40 years. And I think we're the ones who make the change happen. So I'm going to continue with this message.
I love the message. It's a message grounded on data. It's a message grounded on the human experience, because
Yes,
you and I have seen it. We've witnessed
we have.
how women entrepreneurs who grow their businesses are employing people in their communities, are growing, are impacting. I just want to go back to the AI point, and you said it
Okay.
beautifully. Yes, it's a new technology. We all need to be involved and engaged, because the part of AI that really doesn't get spoken about is that it still relies on the human values and the
It
human
does.
judgment, and therefore we need to make sure that women are at the table as we continue to talk about AI, and build that framework, which, as you know, President Biden has instituted an international AI framework. But
Yes.
I also want to round off this conversation, because you and I can talk forever. We're passionate about it. We know it because we believe in it and we see it. Where can listeners get more information regarding WeBank? And tell me a bit more about your conference, which is happening in Colorado.
Okay, well, resource wise, I think that it could be no better place to be a woman owned business or an entrepreneur or small business, right? No better place than the United States of America, right? Because you can go to individual agencies like yours that have very specific pieces of information on how to do business, how to grow your business, that sort of thing. We have a small business administration, right? The SBA has a plethora of resources, including some lending platforms, right, that can help to grow and to feed this small business engine. So on that side, I would say absolutely, that's wonderful. I think you have organizations like WeBank. I'll do a shameless plug, right? We exist solely to ensure that we're looking at the inhibitors for women in doing business and in running businesses, and helping to skill those women up to be competitive in the supply chain that's both the public and the private sector. And so you can go to our website, webank.org, WBENC.org. You can go to the National Women's Business Council that has a lot of information as well. You can literally go to our women business centers that are out there. There's a women business center in well over 100 locations around the United States. Each of them has really great information. And that's just to name a few relative to women. There are so many support mechanisms for small business out there. What's going on with the Main Street program? There are so many different things, and all you have to do is use a search, right? Get out there and Google it, and you can find it.
Pam, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your leadership. I know it's not easy being the CEO of an organization. There's so much coming at you at the same time, but you do it with such intellect, such grace, and such gravitas. And I know that WeBank is going to continue to flourish. I extend my continued friendship, but also leverage EDA to the best of our ability, what we can do, how we can connect you to other partners in the federal space. And I want to close out this conversation with the powerful word that you said, and that's partnership.
Yes.
We can't do this work alone, nor should we. So I want to thank you once again, and it was great having this conversation. I hope we don't have to wait for another Women's History Month, because the work that we do together really is year long. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for the great work that all of you do. Without you existing, without you making the changes you are, we wouldn't be able to be effective. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.